Growing up, I never felt like the favorite child in my family. My brother Marcus was the golden boy, the one with the natural business sense, as my father always said. While I worked hard to earn straight A's and perfect SAT scores, Marcus could barely maintain a C average. But somehow that didn't matter. He had charisma, they said. He knew how to talk to people. He would inherit Morrison Industries one day, the company my grandfather built from nothing. I was just Olivia, the quiet one who spent too much time studying. "You should be more like your brother," my mother would say, shaking her head as I pored over my textbooks. "Business isn't about books, it's about personality." But I knew better. I saw how our family company was struggling under my father's outdated leadership. I noticed the declining profits, the mounting debt, the whispers among employees. While Marcus partied his way through business school, I was secretly taking night classes in corporate finance and strategic management. Not that my parents noticed. The day everything changed started like any other Sunday family dinner. I sat at our massive dining table, listening to Marcus boast about his latest business idea, another half-baked scheme that would never work. My father nodded along, completely enraptured, while my mother beamed with pride. Then I noticed the stack of papers my father was trying to hide behind the bread basket. Bills. Lots of them, all stamped with red, "Final notice" warnings. "Dad," I interrupted Marcus's monologue about cryptocurrency investments. "Is everything okay with the company?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father's face darkened. "That's none of your concern, Olivia." But it was my concern, because unlike my parents, I had been watching our family legacy crumble for years. Morrison Industries, once a leader in industrial manufacturing, was hemorrhaging money under my father's mismanagement and my brother's reckless investments. That night, after everyone went to bed, I snuck into my father's home office. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Morrison Industries was $90,000 in debt, with major loans coming due within the week. My parents were about to lose everything my grandfather had built. I had been saving money for years, working consulting jobs on the side while maintaining my boring accounting position. I had plans for that money, dreams of starting my own company. But family comes first, right? The next morning, I transferred every penny I had saved, exactly $90,000, to cover the company's immediate debts. I thought they would be grateful. I thought they would finally see my value. I was wrong. "You did the UAA take." My father roared when I showed him the transfer receipts. His face turned an alarming shade of purple. "How dare you interfere in company business?" "I saved the company," I said calmly, though my hands were shaking. Those debts would have bankrupted us by Friday. "Us?" My mother's laugh was cruel. "There is no us in business, Olivia. This is a family company, and you're not part of its future." "But I just gave you everything I had." My voice trailed off as I saw Marcus smirking from the doorway. "Nobody asked you to play hero," he drawled. "Dad and I had everything under control. We were about to close a huge deal next week." I knew he was lying. I had seen the numbers. There was no deal. G-H-T-L-G. My father suddenly screamed, slamming his fist on his desk. "IOUREDEAD2US. How dare you try to make us look incompetent? You did that all on your own," I whispered, but they weren't listening. My mother was already calling the security guards. "Escort her out," she ordered coldly, "and make sure she never sets foot in this building again." As the guards led me out of the office building my grandfather had built, I felt something inside me break. But it wasn't my spirit. It was the last thread of loyalty I felt toward my family. They thought they had won. They thought they had put me in my place. They had no idea that I had been preparing for this moment for years. You see, while they were dismissing me as the quiet bookworm, I had been building connections. While they mocked my boring accounting job, I had been learning everything about corporate takeovers. And while they kicked me out of the family business, they didn't realize I had already set in motion a plan that would change everything. That night, as I sat in my small apartment, I made a call to someone I had been carefully cultivating a relationship with for the past year. Harold Bennett, the CEO of Bennett Acquisitions, one of the largest corporate raiders on the East Coast. They kicked you out? Harold's voice was calm, but I could hear the hint of anticipation. Then I suppose it's time to proceed with our plan. Yes, I replied, my voice steady despite the tears drying on my cheeks. Start buying shares. Buy everything you can get. But remember our agreement. When this is over, I want to be CEO. Of course, Harold chuckled. After all, who better to run Morrison Industries than a Morrison? Even if your family is too blind to see your potential. I hung up and walked to my window, looking out at the city lights. In 3 months, Morrison Industries would hold its annual board meeting. In 3 months, my family would learn exactly what their quiet, bookish daughter was capable of. They had no idea what was coming. In the weeks that followed, I watched from afar as my family celebrated their victory over me. My brother posted pictures of himself in father's office, practicing his future CEO pose. My mother hosted lavish dinner parties, bragging about how they had dealt with a troublesome situation. They didn't notice their company's shares being quietly bought up by various shell companies. They didn't see the web I was weaving around them. They were too busy congratulating themselves on putting me in my place. But I noticed everything. I saw their desperate attempts to secure new loans. I watched as my father's face grew more haggard with each passing week. I observed my brother's boasts becoming increasingly hollow as investors began pulling out. The $90,000 I had given them had bought them a brief reprieve, but without proper management, the company was once again sliding toward disaster, just as I had predicted, just as I had planned. They're getting desperate, Harold informed me during our weekly update. Your father tried to approach our competitors for a merger yesterday. Nobody's interested. Of course they weren't. I had made sure of that. How much longer? I asked, reviewing the latest acquisition reports. 2 more weeks, Harold replied. By then, we'll own 51% of Morrison Industries. You'll have your chance at the board meeting. I smiled, thinking of my father's face, when he would realize what was coming. Perfect. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother, the first contact since they'd thrown me out. We're having a family dinner on Sunday. Your father might be willing to forgive you if you apologize. I didn't bother responding. In 2 weeks, they would learn that I wasn't the one who needed forgiveness. The stage was set. The pieces were in motion. All I had to do was wait. And I had become very good at waiting. The morning of the board meeting arrived with a sense of destiny. I stood in my penthouse apartment. Not that my family knew I could afford one, adjusting my tailored black suit. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the quiet daughter my parents had dismissed. Gone was the intentionally understated wardrobe, the careful attempt to avoid attention. Today, I dressed like what I was about to become, a CEO. My phone buzzed. A text from Harold. Everything's ready. Our people are in position. I smiled, remembering the past 3 months of careful preparation. While my family was busy pretending I didn't exist, I had orchestrated the most aggressive corporate takeover Morrison Industries had ever faced. The first phase had been the easiest, buying up shares through various shell companies. My father, always too proud to notice the obvious, hadn't even questioned why so many new investors were suddenly interested in his failing company. The second phase had been trickier, convincing key board members to support the leadership change. But that's where my boring attention to detail had paid off. I had spent years studying the company's operations, identifying its weaknesses, and developing solutions. When I presented my revival strategy to these board members in private meetings, they had been impressed. More importantly, they had been convinced. "Your father never once showed us numbers like these," one board member had admitted. "He just keeps talking about the good old days and how his son will restore the company's glory." I had smiled politely and added his vote to my growing collection. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert about Morrison Industries' stock price. It had dropped another 15% overnight. Right on schedule. Amazing what can happen when carefully selected rumors about a company's stability start circulating in the right circles. As my private elevator descended to the garage level, I thought about the last family dinner I had declined to attend. My mother had left a voicemail, her voice syrupy sweet with false concern. "Darling, you're being ridiculous. Your father is willing to let you return to your old position if you just apologize. Marcus even suggested you could assist with his new cryptocurrency division." I had deleted the message without responding. Let them think I was sulking. Let them believe I was nursing my wounded pride in some small apartment, regretting my interference. The reality was so much more satisfying. My driver opened the car door, and I slid into the leather backseat, opening my briefcase to review my notes one last time. The takeover documentation was perfect, every detail scrutinized, every loophole closed. I had learned from watching my father's mistakes. There would be no last-minute escapes, no clever legal maneuvers to save them. "Ms. Morrison," my driver interrupted my thoughts. "Mr. Bennett called. He's already at the office with the legal team." I nodded, watching the city streets blur past. Harold had played his part perfectly, the aggressive corporate raider making a hostile takeover attempt. My family had been so focused on fighting him, they hadn't noticed the real threat was much closer to home. The Morrison Industries building loomed ahead, 40 stories of glass and steel that my grandfather had built from nothing. I remembered coming here as a child, holding his hand as he showed me around the factory floor. "Remember Olivia?" He had said, "A good leader knows every inch of their business from the ground up." I had remembered. Unlike my father and brother, who view the company as their personal playground, I had spent my summers working in different departments, learning every aspect of the operation. The employees I passed in the lobby nodded respectfully. They remembered me, even if my family had tried to erase my existence. The elevator ride to the executive floor was silent. When the doors opened, I could hear raised voices from the boardroom, my father's distinctive roar cutting through the general chaos. "This is outrageous. Bennett can't do this. We are a family company." I paused outside the boardroom doors, checking my reflection in a nearby window. My suit was immaculate, my makeup perfect, my expression composed. I thought about all the times I had sat quietly at family dinners, listening to Marcus boast about his latest failures while my parents beamed with pride. Never again. Harold met me in the anteroom, his eyes twinkling with anticipation. "They're all inside. Your father's trying to convince the board to reject our offer and take out more loans instead." "Is Marcus still planning to present his cryptocurrency proposal?" Harold chuckled. He's got a whole PowerPoint prepared. Claims it will save the company. I checked my watch. Right on schedule then, shall we? Harold gestured to the doors. After you. It's your show now. I took a deep breath, thinking of my grandfather, of his legacy, of everything my family had nearly destroyed through their arrogance and incompetence. The boardroom doors swung open. My father stood at the head of the table, his face red with fury as he waved documents in the air. Marcus sat nearby, smirking as he prepared to launch his presentation. My mother perched in a corner, already planning how to spin this crisis at her next charity luncheon. None of them noticed me at first. This company is not for sale, my father was shouting. Bennett can take his hostile takeover and... Actually, I cut in, my voice carrying clearly across the room. The company is already sold. The silence was absolute. Every head turned toward me. I saw the moment of confusion in their eyes, followed by disbelief, followed by the first flickering of fear. Security, my father bellowed, but nobody moved. I smiled, walking calmly to the center of the room. The security team reports to the majority shareholder now, and as of 9 o'clock this morning, that would be me. Marcus jumped to his feet, his carefully practiced CEO pose crumbling. That's impossible. You're lying. Sit down, Marcus, I said quietly, but with enough authority that he dropped back into his chair automatically. The adults are talking now. I turned to address the board members, many of whom were hiding smiles behind their hands. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the theatrics, but I believe we have some urgent business to discuss. Specifically, the future leadership of Morrison Industries. You can't do this, my father whispered, but his voice had lost its power. We kicked you out. Yes, I agreed, setting my briefcase on the table. You did. Right after I paid off $90,000 of debt that you and Marcus had accumulated through incompetence and vanity. That was your first mistake. I began distributing documents to the board members. Your second mistake was assuming I would simply disappear. Your third mistake was not checking who was really behind Bennett Acquisition's recent interest in the company. Understanding dawned in my father's eyes. You were working with Bennett? Working with him? Harold stepped forward, grinning. She was directing everything. Most brilliant corporate takeover strategy I've seen in 30 years. My mother stood up, her social mask cracking. Why? Why would you do this to your family? Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You made it very clear that I wasn't family. I was just the quiet bookworm who didn't understand business, the disappointment who couldn't be trusted with the company's future. I walked to the head of the table, my father's place. His eyes widened as I gestured for him to move. Well, now you're going to learn exactly what this quiet bookworm can do. Please, take your seats. We have a lot to discuss about your future roles in my company. The color drained from their faces as the full impact of my words sank in. I was no longer the daughter they could dismiss, or the sister they could mock. I was their boss, and their performance review was about to begin. The silence in the boardroom was deafening as I took my place at the head of the table. My father had slunk into a chair, his face ashen, while my mother gripped her designer handbag so tightly her knuckles were white. Marcus kept opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water, his cryptocurrency PowerPoint forgotten on his laptop. Now then, I began, my voice steady and professional. Let's discuss the current state of Morrison Industries under its previous management. I nodded to Harold, who dimmed the lights and started the presentation I had prepared. Financial graphs appeared on the screen, all trending downward. In the past 5 years, company value has dropped 60%. Market share has decreased by 45%. Employee turnover has reached record highs. I clicked to the next slide. And most concerning, over $12 million has been invested in what the books call innovative initiatives. I turned to Marcus, whose face had gone pale. Would you like to explain to the board what happened to those investments, brother? Or shall I pull up the records of your failed cryptocurrency scheme, the disastrous NFT marketplace, the social media app that never launched? Those were calculated risks, he stammered. Every business has. Every business has to be accountable. I cut him off. Something this company has lacked for far too long. My father finally found his voice. You have no right to. I have every right, I interrupted calmly. As majority shareholder and newly appointed CEO, I have not only the right, but the responsibility to address these issues. Now let's discuss your positions. I pulled out 3 envelopes and slid them across the table. Inside, you'll find the terms of your separation from Morrison Industries. You can either accept these very generous severance packages and step down quietly, or... I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We can discuss the results of the forensic audit I had conducted last month. My mother gasped. Marcus started sweating. My father's face turned an interesting shade of purple. You wouldn't dare, he growled. We're your family. Family. I stood up slowly, placing both hands on the table. Let me tell you about family. Family doesn't mock someone's hard work. Family doesn't dismiss someone's contributions. And family certainly doesn't throw someone out after they've sacrificed everything to help. I straightened up, adjusting my suit jacket. But you're right about one thing. We are family. Which is why I'm offering you a choice instead of having security escort you out right now. Harold stepped forward, placing a stack of documents in front of each of them. You have until the end of this meeting to decide. The severance packages are quite generous, certainly more generous than you deserve. I suggest you review them carefully. My mother opened her envelope with trembling hands. Her eyes widened as she saw the figures. This is more than fair. I finished for her. You'll maintain your social status, keep your country club memberships, continue your charity work. All I ask is that you step down quietly and stay out of company business. Marcus was next, scanning his documents with increasing desperation. But what am I supposed to do? Get a real job, I suggested. One where you actually have to work for your money. Novel concept, I know. My father hadn't touched his envelope. He just sat there, staring at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. How long? He finally asked. How long have you been planning this? I met his gaze steadily. Since the first time you told me I didn't understand business. Since you dismissed every suggestion I made. Since you decided Marcus was the only one worthy of grandfather's legacy. I pulled out one final document, my grandfather's original business plan for Morrison Industries, written in his careful handwriting. Grandfather knew, I said softly. He saw what you couldn't. Why do you think he spent so much time teaching me about the company? Why do you think he made sure I understood every aspect of the business? My father's face crumpled as realization dawned. He was preparing you. Yes, I nodded. He knew you were too proud to see the company's problems, too stubborn to adapt to changing markets, too blinded by Marcus's empty charm to see the damage he was doing. I opened the business plan to a page I had memorized long ago. The last thing he wrote before he died was this: Morrison Industries will need strong leadership to survive the future. Look for the one who understands that success isn't about swagger or showmanship. It's about substance. The board members nodded in approval. They had seen the truth of these words in the detailed revival strategy I had presented them. You have 1 hour to decide, I announced, standing up. Sign the severance agreements or face a very public audit. Your choice. As I walked toward the door, my mother called out, Wait, what about family dinners? Holidays? You can't just. I turned back one last time. I'm not the one who decided money was more important than family. You did that 3 months ago when you threw me out. I'm just better at the game than you are. The next hour passed quickly as I met with department heads, reviewed urgent contracts, and began implementing the changes I had planned for months. Harold kept me updated on my family's deliberations. Your mother signed first, he reported. Marcus followed once he realized his trust fund would be frozen if he didn't. Your father is being stubborn, I finished. Give him 10 more minutes. 9 minutes later, my father's signature appeared on the documents. It was done. Morrison Industries was mine. That evening, as I sat in what was now my office, the same office where they had humiliated me 3 months ago, I looked out at the city lights and thought about everything that had happened. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. I know you're angry, but we're still family. Maybe someday. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my grandfather's business plan again, running my fingers over his familiar handwriting. There was one page my father had never seen, a letter addressed to me. Dearest Olivia, I see your strength, your intelligence, and your dedication. When the time comes, you'll know what to do to save our legacy. It won't be easy. Family rarely is. But remember, true leadership isn't about power over others. It's about the power to make things right. Love, grandfather. I smiled, thinking of how right he had been. Then I turned to my computer and began working on my plans to restore Morrison Industries to its former glory. I had a legacy to protect, after all. And this time, I would do it my way. Over the next year, Morrison Industries underwent a transformation. The changes I implemented, the ones my father had dismissed as unnecessary, led to a 40% increase in profits. Employee satisfaction reached an all-time high. Our stock price doubled. My family watched from a distance, excluded from the success they had once taken for granted. My mother still sent occasional texts, usually around holidays, trying to rebuild bridges they had burned. Marcus got a job at a mid-level marketing firm, where he actually had to work for a living. My father? Well, he retired to Florida, unable to face the reality that his quiet, bookish daughter had outmaneuvered him completely. As for me, I kept my grandfather's business plan on my desk as a reminder, not of revenge or victory, but of what real leadership means. Sometimes the strongest person in the room isn't the loudest. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about building something better than they ever imagined possible. They thought kicking me out would break me. Instead, it made me unstoppable. And that's a lesson my family will never forget.